The noon sun burned white over the town of Bitter Creek, baking the dirt street until it shimmered like hammered copper. Heat waves swam above the hitching posts, and the smell of hot iron drifted from the blacksmith's forge. A lean figure rode in from the east, dust ghosting from his trail. Eli Carter sat the saddle with the patience of a man who'd crossed 1,000 empty miles. His hat brimmed shaded eyes the color of gunmetal, and the gray at his temples matched the worn leather of his duster. He reined his bay mare in front of the saloon, the creak of saddle leather lost beneath the restless murmur of townsfolk. Word had been running ahead of him, like wildfire on a dry wind. A Spanish treasure buried somewhere beyond the blood-red canyons. Gold that had lured men to ruin for half a century. Whispers said the map was in Bitter Creek, changing hands like a curse. Eli had seen men kill for less. The saloon door swung, and a younger rider stepped out, tall and wiry, shirt open at the throat, dust streaking his jaw. Luke Moran carried himself with the sly ease of someone who'd lived by his wits more than his gun. His eyes held a restless spark, the kind that scanned a room for opportunity even while smiling. "You Carter?" he asked, voice smooth as creek water. Eli studied him for a long beat, measuring the confidence in the young man's stance, the calluses on his hands. "Depends who's asking." "Name's Luke. I heard you're after the same thing I am. Figured we might keep each other breathing." Eli dismounted slowly, boots hitting the dust with a soft thud. "And what makes you think I need company?" "'Cause I saw the men who came in on the stage an hour ago," Luke said, tilting his head toward the boarding house across the street. "Hard eyes, heavy coats for summer. They're not here for the view." A gust of wind lifted grit across the street. Eli followed Luke's gaze and caught a flicker of movement behind the curtains of an upstairs window. A shadow drawn back, just a heartbeat too late. Inside the saloon, the air smelled of stale whiskey and sweat. Cards slapped on wood tables, coins clinked, but conversations died as the two men stepped through. The barkeep nodded warily. Everyone in the room seemed to know something they weren't saying. Luke leaned on the bar, casual but alert. "Stories travel fast. They say a Spanish friar buried a mule train of gold somewhere out past Devil's Spine. Left clues carved in stone, hidden in caves. Folks have been chasing ghosts ever since." Eli accepted a glass of water and let the coolness slide down his throat. "Ghost stories have a way of getting men shot." "Or rich," Luke countered, grin flashing before fading into something harder. "My brother died chasing rumors like this. I figure I'll finish what he started, or at least find out why men keep dying for a fairy tale." A chair scraped behind them. Eli shifted slightly, enough to see two strangers enter, big shoulders under dusters, the set of their jaws promising trouble. They scanned the room with predatory calm and chose a corner table where they could watch every door. One wore a black hat pulled low, the other a scar across his cheek, like a pale river. Luke's voice lowered. "That's them. They rode in on the stage. Been asking about maps and markers since they hit town." Eli felt the weight of his revolver at his hip, an old comfort. "You still think we're chasing a bedtime story?" "I think we're running out of time," Luke said. Evening bled across the sky, turning the windows to squares of molten gold. The two newcomers left without a word, but the air they disturbed felt colder after they passed. Outside, townsfolk whispered, the rumor of treasure twisting like smoke through every doorway. Eli and Luke sat at a corner table, voices low. "You got a plan?" Eli asked. "I know a man," Luke said. "Prospector named Calder. Claims he's seen the friar's carvings. If anyone's got the real map, it's him. He's camped 2 miles out near the dry creek." Eli nodded once. "Then we ride before moonrise." They left the saloon to a sky streaked with crimson. Horses snorted as they mounted, the leather creaking beneath them. Behind them, shutters clicked closed like nervous eyelids. The trail out of town was a ribbon of silver dust under a rising moon. Coyotes called from the hills, their cries sharp as broken glass. Eli rode silent, listening to the rhythm of hooves and the restless scrape of crickets. Luke kept glancing over his shoulder, every shadow a possible ambush. "You ever wonder why you chase this?" Eli finally asked. Luke shrugged, eyes fixed on the horizon. Maybe it's about proving the story's real. Maybe it's about my brother. Maybe it's just the kind of trouble I'm built for." Eli said nothing, but in the hush of the desert his own reasons echoed. Memories of comrades lost to greed, of a promise to a dying partner that he'd see the legend buried for good. They reached the dry creek near midnight. Moonlight silvered the rocks and the husk of a burned wagon. Calder's campfire flickered faintly ahead. As they dismounted, a twig snapped to the right. Eli froze. From the darkness came a low voice. "You took your time." A gaunt figure stepped into the light. Calder, beard like winter sage, eyes glittering with feverish excitement. He held a tattered scrap of parchment, edges charred. "Map's real," he rasped. "But you're not alone on the trail. Those devils from town followed me here." Even as he spoke, the distant clop of hooves carried on the night air. Luke's hand went to his rifle. Eli scanned the ridgeline where faint silhouettes moved against the stars. "They won't wait long," Calder warned, "and they'll kill for this." He thrust the parchment at Eli, hands trembling. "The gold's hidden past the Red Canyon, under the sign of the Serpent Stone. But beware, the land itself hungers for blood." Eli felt the brittle map between his fingers. Its ink faded, but still legible in the moonlight. A legend, yes, but the menace in the approaching hoofbeats was no ghost. Luke met his gaze, a flicker of fear and determination mingling in his eyes. "Looks like the race just started." The first rifle shot cracked across the canyon, echoing like thunder over dry earth. Dust leapt from the rocks near their feet. Eli pulled his revolver free, the cold steel an extension of his will. Another shot, closer this time. Horses screamed in the dark. Calder dove for cover, clutching his chest. Luke rolled behind a boulder, returning fire with the precision of a marksman. Each shot a flash of light in the moon-soaked night. Eli crouched low, heart steady. The gang from Bitter Creek had arrived, their figures ghosting through the scrub. Shadows moved like predators circling prey. The treasure's lure had drawn them all, but the first real contest was beginning in the dust and rumor of a desert night where gold, greed, and death rode side by side. Dawn crept over the desert in a slow blaze, staining the mesas with firelight. Eli and Luke rode west beneath a sky so wide it seemed to swallow the world. The trail to the Red Canyons shimmered like a molten ribbon, heat rising in waves though the morning air still carried a bite of night. Their horses moved at a steady lope, hooves striking sparks from stone. Behind them, Bitter Creek lay hidden in dust, and ahead stretched miles of country where few men returned with their lives. The first hours passed in taut silence, broken only by the rasp of leather and the occasional call of a hawk wheeling high above. Eli studied the land with the patience of a scout. Every bend of dry wash, every scatter of mesquite, he marked with a soldier's caution. Luke, restless in the saddle, scanned the horizon with bright eyes, his rifle across his thighs, like an afterthought. When the sun climbed higher and the wind shifted, Eli caught the faint metallic tang of approaching heat. "We push through the next rise," he said, voice low but firm. "By noon the rocks will fry an egg." They reached the rise and paused. Beyond stretched a maze of crimson cliffs and deep-walled gorges, the famous Red Canyons. Striped with layers of rust and gold, the cliffs towered like fortress walls, throwing back the sun in blinding flashes. Luke let out a low whistle. If the friar wanted to hide gold, he chose the devil's own hiding place. Eli dismounted and crouched to examine the dry soil. "This is where the land starts testing a man," he murmured. "Keep your canteen tight and your eyes open." By midday the heat became a living thing. The air wavered, thick as molten glass, and sweat carved rivers through the dust on their skin. Lizards darted from shadow to shadow. Twice they spotted rattlers stretched across the trail, scales gleaming like tarnished coins. Luke lifted his rifle to strike one, but Eli stayed his hand with a quiet shake of the head. "They belong here more than we do. Step around." The canyons narrowed as they pressed deeper, shadows cooling the rock but carrying a sense of entrapment. Sheer walls loomed overhead, carved by ages of wind into grotesque faces that seemed to watch their passing. Their horses' breaths came in quick huffs, echoing eerily. Luke's nerves twitched with every sound. Feels like riding through the throat of something alive, he said. A sudden rustle of gravel snapped both men to alert. Eli's Colt cleared its holster in a blink. From a cleft above, a single shot rang out and sparked against the stone near Luke's stirrup. He flung himself behind a boulder, returning fire with precise, deliberate aim. The echoes boomed like cannon fire. Silence followed, broken only by a crow's cry. Eli signaled for stillness, then scaled the rock with the agility of a younger man. Moments later he returned, jaw tight. One shooter. Gone now. Left his brass behind. He held up a spent shell, still warm. They're tracking us. They pressed on at a grueling pace, nerves strung tight. As the afternoon waned, a windstorm roared from the west, filling the canyon with red dust that scoured skin and blinded eyes. Horses balked, nostrils flaring, and the men wrapped scarves over their faces, pushing forward through a world gone blood-colored and wild. Grit filled their teeth, and the sky disappeared in a rust-red haze. When at last the storm relented, the canyon lay quiet, transformed. Rock spires glowed under a copper dusk, and the ground was littered with fresh debris. Luke spat out dust and muttered a curse, but Eli's gaze had fixed on something half-buried near a fallen juniper. He knelt, brushing away sand to reveal a flat slab etched with worn symbols, a serpent winding toward a star. Luke crouched beside him, eyes wide. "Marker. Could be," Eli said, tracing the lines with a calloused finger. The carving was old, edges softened by centuries, yet the serpent's curve pointed unmistakably toward a shadowed ravine. "Friar's guardians left these," Eli added. "Warnings or directions, maybe both." They made camp beneath an overhang, the stone still radiating heat from the day's sun. A small fire flickered between them, its smoke winding upward to vanish among the stars. Luke cleaned his rifle with meticulous care, but his eyes kept straying to the dark ravine where the serpent pointed. "You ever wonder if it's worth it?" he asked quietly. "All this for a story?" Eli stared into the flames, the light etching deep lines across his weathered face. For a long while he said nothing. Then, in a voice roughened by years and regret, he began. 5 years back, I rode with a partner named Samuel. We'd heard the same rumors, Spanish gold, easy fortune. We were young enough to believe it. We tracked a lead clear into Apache country. Got ambushed by men, just like the ones chasing us now. I made it out. He didn't. Luke listened, the crackle of fire filling the silence that followed. Eli's gaze never left the flames. Samuel left behind a wife and 2 daughters in Kansas. I promised them I'd see this legend buried for good, or bring back enough to set them right. I've been riding ever since, chasing a ghost, so no one else has to die for it. Maybe I'm still just a fool trying to keep a promise. The confession hung in the canyon's hush, carried on a breeze scented with sage and stone. Luke felt something shift between them, a weight of understanding, a respect deeper than words. "Sounds less like a fool and more like a man finishing what he started," he said softly. Eli gave a faint, tired smile. "Maybe." Above them the stars wheeled brilliant and cold. Coyotes called from distant ridges, their cries a mournful chorus. Luke tightened his blanket, the serpent marker etched in his thoughts. Somewhere beyond that ravine lay either salvation or death, and the men who stalked them would not turn back. He glanced at Eli, who sat straight back despite the miles, the firelight catching the gray in his hair like silver wire. For the first time Luke understood that the older man wasn't merely chasing gold. He was chasing redemption, and he would see it through even if the desert claimed them both. When the fire burned low, they lay down on the hard earth, revolvers within easy reach. The canyon walls loomed above like the ribs of some ancient beast, and the wind whispered through the stones in a voice older than memory. Sleep came fitful, haunted by the knowledge that at dawn they would ride deeper into the labyrinth, where men vanished and legends were born. Moonlight pooled across the canyon floor like quicksilver as Eli and Luke guided their horses through a narrow defile. The night air felt thin and sharp, each breath tinged with the scent of juniper and stone. Somewhere behind them, faint but relentless, came the soft clatter of hooves. The gang had followed through the storm and the labyrinth of red walls, moving like wolves on a scent. Eli kept his mare at a steady trot, ears straining for every echo. Luke rode slightly ahead, eyes bright with attention that was half fear and half fire. A coyote's wail split the night and died away. Then came another sound, metal against rock, too deliberate to be an animal. Eli reined in and raised a hand. Both men dismounted in silence, boots sinking into the cool sand. The canyon's dark mouth yawned before them, and the moonlit cliffs seemed to lean closer, listening. Eli pointed to a cluster of boulders, and they slipped into the shadows, leading their horses to cover. Minutes dragged like hours. The wind sighed across the stone, and the smell of sweat and leather grew stronger. A silhouette emerged along the ridge, a rider, then another, then four more, each outlined by the pale glow above. The gang. Their voices floated down, low and hard, planning a kill. Eli's fingers brushed the grip of his Colt. Luke rested his rifle on a rock, breathing slow, eyes narrowed. But the outlaw stayed just out of range, spreading wide, trying to box them in. A match flared briefly as someone lit a cigar. The tiny spark winked out, but the smell of tobacco drifted into the canyon like a taunt. Without warning, a gunshot cracked from the ridge. Sand jumped at Eli's boots. Another shot followed, sparking against the stone. The night erupted with muzzle flashes, thunder rolling from cliff to cliff. Eli dove behind a boulder, returning fire with measured precision. Luke slid into position beside him, rifle steady, his face carved with focus. A bullet whined past and gouged the rock above. Stone splinters sliced Eli's cheek, warm blood trickling down his jaw. He gritted his teeth and fired again, aiming at the flash of a gun muzzle high on the ridge. One of the silhouettes staggered and fell, tumbling into darkness. The others pressed closer, relentless. Luke exhaled, long and slow, then shifted his rifle to a flat slab of stone. "Cover me," he said. Before Eli could answer, the young drifter rose to one knee and sighted down the barrel, calm as a man at target practice. A single shot cracked the night. One outlaw pitched backward, arms flailing. Luke worked a lever and fired again, and another figure crumpled before he could return fire. His movements were smooth, almost graceful, each shot deliberate and deadly. Eli watched in stunned silence as Luke picked the gang apart at a distance that would have daunted an army sharpshooter. In less than a minute, the canyon fell quiet except for the echo of retreating hoofbeats. The survivors fled into the maze of shadows, their courage broken by an unexpected marksman. When the last echo died, Luke lowered the rifle, chest rising and falling with steady breaths. He glanced at Eli, a faint grin cutting through the dust on his face. "Picked up a thing or two trapping wolves in the Dakotas," he said softly. "Never thought it'd come to this." Eli wiped the blood from his cheek, respect flickering in his eyes. "You kept that talent close," he said. "I won't forget it." They waited until silence convinced them the gang had truly gone, then led their horses deeper into the canyon. The moon rode high, silvering the cliffs, while a cold wind carried the smell of gunpowder and iron. Eli's side throbbed where a grazing bullet had left a shallow furrow, but he pushed on. By the time dawn blushed along the horizon, they reached a plateau where the ruins of an old mission crouched like a wounded animal. Crumbling adobe walls leaned at odd angles, and a sagging bell tower speared the sky. Bats fluttered from the rafters as they approached, their wings whispering like dry leaves. "This is it," Luke murmured, awe and unease mingling in his voice. "One of the friar's outposts." They dismounted and entered through a collapsed arch inside. The air smelled of dust and forgotten prayers. Shafts of early light speared through holes in the roof, illuminating faded murals of saints whose eyes had long since darkened. A wooden altar lay shattered, and the stone floor bore the black scars of an old fire. Near the altar, half buried under rubble, Eli spotted a bundle of parchment singed along its edges. He knelt, brushing away soot to reveal fragments of intricate lines and faded Spanish script. The map, or what remained of it. Luke crouched beside him, brow furrowing as he studied the charred relic. "Half gone," he said. "The rest is ashes." Eli traced the surviving symbols, a winding serpent, a star, a series of crosses marking ridges and dry rivers. Enough to guide a man with the right eyes. he said quietly. "But we'll need more than luck." Outside, a sudden gust moaned through the bell tower, swinging the rusted bell with a hollow clang that echoed like a warning. Luke stiffened, scanning the canyon rim. "You think they'll come back?" "They're not finished," Eli replied. "Men who hunt treasure never quit easy." They packed the fragile map in oilcloth and secured it in Eli's saddlebag. Blood still trickled slowly from his side, and Luke tore a strip from his own shirt to bind the wound. The young man's hands were steady despite the tremor of adrenaline that still clung to him. "You sure you can ride?" Luke asked. Eli tightened the knot of the bandage and gave a brief nod. "I've ridden through worse." He met Luke's gaze, a flicker of admiration crossing his stern features. "You're full of surprises, kid. You saved our hides." Luke shrugged, but the pride in his eyes was unmistakable. "Guess the wolves taught me more than trapping." The sun climbed higher, painting the mission walls in shades of copper and gold. Eli mounted his mare with a wince, scanning the horizon where the canyon walls stretched like ancient guardians. Somewhere out there, the gang regrouped, hungry for blood and fortune. Somewhere beyond, the treasure waited beneath the serpent's sign. As they rode from the mission, the bell's lonely toll followed them down the trail, a reminder of faith, greed, and the thin line between legend and death. The desert wind carried their silhouettes westward, two riders bound by danger and the fragile hope that instinct and courage would outlast the men who hunted them. The sky boiled black as evening bled across the desert, clouds churning like smoke from a forge. Wind whipped the red dust into spirals that clawed at man and beast alike. Eli and Luke pressed their horses through the oncoming storm, the half-burned map guiding them toward the jagged silhouette of Devil's Spine. Thunder rolled in the distance, low and menacing, and the first cold drops of rain struck their faces like thrown pebbles. Lightning split the horizon, a sheet of blinding silver that revealed a canyon mouth carved into the rock like the grin of some ancient beast. For an instant, the flash lit a dark arch high on the cliffside, an opening no natural eye would have spotted in daylight. Luke reined his horse hard, eyes wide. "There!" he shouted over the wind. "The cavern." Eli nodded, the brim of his hat slick with rain. They dismounted and led their horses into a cleft of stone for shelter. The storm screamed around them, rain hammering the rocks, but the hidden entrance remained like a shadow against the cliff, beckoning. A sudden crack of rifle fire shattered the roar of the wind. Sparks leapt from the stone inches from Eli's shoulder. Luke dropped to a crouch, scanning the darkness. Out of the driving rain came the gang, 4 riders, black silhouettes against the lightning's glare, guns drawn and eyes like burning coals. "End of the trail, Carter," their leader bellowed, voice carrying even through the storm. "Hand over that map, and maybe we let the kid live." Eli's hand hovered near his Colt. Luke's rifle was already up, but Eli raised a quiet palm. "They won't kill us yet," he said, calm beneath the thunder. "They want what we know." The gang fanned out, shadows merging with the night. Rain sluiced down their dusters, turning the sand into blood-colored mud. One of them fired a warning shot that ricocheted off the rock, sparks dancing in the wet dark. "Follow me," Eli whispered to Luke. He slipped along the cliff wall, guiding them toward the hidden arch lightning struck again, bathing the rock in blue-white light and revealing the narrow path upward. They climbed, fingers clawing into wet stone, the roar of the storm masking their movement. Bullets sparked around them, but the thunder swallowed the sound of their boots. At last they hauled themselves onto a narrow ledge and ducked inside the cavern's mouth. Within, the air was cool and ancient, heavy with the scent of damp earth and something metallic beneath. Their lantern cast a wavering glow across walls streaked with mineral veins that shimmered like threads of gold. The cavern opened into a vast chamber where stalactites dripped slow and patient, and there, half buried in rubble, lay chests bound in rusted iron, coins and chalices spilling like frozen sunlight. Luke exhaled a sharp breath. "It's real," he whispered. "After all of it, real." The gang's footsteps clattered behind them. Figures emerged from the tunnel, eyes gleaming with greed at the sight of the treasure. Their leader stepped forward, revolver leveled. "End of the line," he sneered. "Hand over the map and back away." Eli straightened, lantern light painting harsh lines across his weathered face. "You've been hunting this longer than you know," he said, voice carrying a quiet authority that silenced even the echoes. He reached slowly into his coat, not for his gun, but for a worn leather wallet. From it he drew a tarnished badge, the five-pointed star catching the lamplight. "Pinkerton National Detective Agency," he said. "Name's Eli Carter. You're wanted for murder and robbery in 3 territories. This hunt was never for the gold, it was for you." The leader's eyes narrowed, disbelief twisting to rage. "You lying." Luke's rifle cracked before the curse finished, the bullet striking a lantern on the far wall and plunging the chamber into chaotic shadows. Gunfire erupted, deafening in the enclosed space, flashes strobing across the gold-laden chamber. Eli moved with the precision of a man long trained for violence, his Colt spitting fire as he sidestepped into darkness. Luke fired from cover, each shot deliberate, echoing like thunderclaps. The outlaws scattered among the pillars of stone, their greed now laced with panic. One charged through the gloom, knife flashing. Eli pivoted, the blade grazing his coat as he fired point-blank, sending the man crumpling to the wet stone. Another outlaw tried to flank Luke, but the young drifter dropped to one knee and squeezed the trigger, the rifle's report ringing like judgment. The leader fought like a cornered coyote, firing wild and furious, until a ricochet of his own shot clipped his shoulder and spun him against the cavern wall. Eli advanced, revolver steady. "It's over," he said, breath even despite the storm of battle. The man sneered through pain. "You think you can drag me back alive?" "If you give me no choice," Eli replied. A final flash of lightning poured through the cavern mouth, illuminating the chamber in ghostly white. The outlaw lunged, but Luke's bullet struck the stone near his hand, forcing him to drop the gun. Eli closed the distance and cuffed him with practiced ease, iron shackles clicking like a closing door. Silence fell except for the drip of water and the distant rumble of the storm. Luke lowered his rifle, chest heaving. He looked at Eli with new understanding. "All this time," he said, "you were tracking them, not the treasure." Eli nodded, wiping rain and blood from his brow. "The gold was bait. I couldn't risk another Pinkerton team spooking them. Took someone willing to ride the legend long enough to draw them out." Luke glanced at the piles of coins glittering in the lantern's faint light. "And the treasure? After all this, you're just going to leave it?" Eli holstered his Colt and studied the ancient wealth, eyes unreadable. "Some things are better left to dust. Gold like this only brings more death." The young man was quiet for a long moment. Then he slung his rifle over his shoulder and gave a slow nod. "Then I ride with you," he said. "Let's see these killers stand trial." Together, they led the shackled outlaw back toward the storm, their shadows stretching long against the cavern's glow. Rain lashed the cliffs as they emerged, the tempest washing blood and gunpowder from their skin. Lightning danced across the desert, turning the world to silver for an instant before darkness reclaimed it. Behind them, the hidden cavern sealed its secrets once more, the echo of gold and greed swallowed by the endless night. Ahead, the law waited, and the legend of the treasure would fade to another whisper on the wind. But the story of 2 riders who brought murderers to justice would outlive every coin left buried beneath the restless earth. Dawn crept over the desert like a slow blessing, washing the torn landscape in pale rose and copper. The storm had blown itself to tatters during the night, leaving the air scrubbed clean and sharp as new-forged steel. Eli stood at the cavern's mouth, shoulders stiff, watching the horizon burn with first light. The outlaw leader sat slumped against a boulder, wrists bound, his breath a rasp of exhaustion and hate. 2 of his wounded men lay silent under blankets a short distance away, their groans fading with the chill of early morning. The treasure behind them gleamed faintly in the cavern's dark throat, sealed once more in its chamber of stone and silence. Luke emerged from the shadows, rifle slung across his back, hair damp from mist. He handed Eli a tin cup of black coffee, the steam curling in the cool air. "The lawmen should be close," he said. "Your signal fire will guide them." Eli accepted the cup, the warmth grounding him. Beyond the red mesas a faint plume of dust already stirred, the promise of riders. "They'll come," he answered. Pinkertons keep their word. The outlaw leader lifted his head, eyes smoldering beneath the grime. You think you've won, he spat. Someone will come for that gold. You can't bury greed. Eli's expression barely shifted. I don't plan to bury it, he said, voice low and certain. I plan to guard it until time itself forgets where it lies. The outlaw's bitter laugh faded to silence as hoofbeats grew distinct on the morning wind. Soon a column of riders emerged from the haze, for men in dark coats, badges glinting in the newborn sun. Their horses trotted sure-footed across the stone, the jingle of tack bright in the stillness. Carter, the lead Pinkerton called as he dismounted. We got your wire. Seems your plan worked after all. Eli gave a curt nod and stepped aside as the agents moved to secure the prisoners. Chains rattled, quiet curses cut the air, and the captured gang was led away with grim efficiency. When the work was done and the lawmen rode east with their quarry, silence returned to the canyon save for the sigh of wind through juniper and the distant cry of a hawk. Luke watched the departing riders until they dwindled to specks. So that's it, he said, almost to himself. Months of blood and dust for a legend we leave behind. Eli studied him, seeing the young man's shoulders drawn tight with questions the world seldom answers. The legend was never the gold, he said. It was the men who thought they could own it, and the ones who proved them wrong. They shared a long quiet, broken only by the crackle of their dying fire. Then Eli turned to face the eastern light, its gold and pink brushing the scars of his face. You've got a steady hand and a sharper mind than most men I've met, he said at last. Pinkerton could use someone like you. We chase justice across every mile of this country. Hard work, hard pay, but it means something. Luke looked toward the horizon where the desert stretched endless and wild. The thought of Lawman's life flickered across his features. Authority, purpose, a badge to weigh his name. But another vision rose stronger. Unclaimed ridges, quiet rivers, the sound of wind through pines where no map could follow. He shook his head slowly. I'm grateful, he said, voice soft but certain. But I've got miles of my own to ride. Places no one owns. A man ought to find his path while the West is still wide enough to hold it. Eli regarded him for a long moment, then smiled faintly, a rare light softening the lines of his weathered face. Then ride it well, he said. The frontier needs men who listen to their own compass. They broke camp as the sun cleared the mesas, painting the world in pure gold. The cavern mouth yawned behind them, its secrets locked in silence, once more. No sign would remain for those who came chasing dreams of Spanish treasure, only the shifting sands and the whisper of wind. Luke swung into the saddle, the bay gelding stamping as if eager for the open trail. Eli mounted beside him, his mare tossing her head against the morning glare. For a moment they sat still, two silhouettes cut from the same hard cloth, gazing across the limitless expanse. Where will you go? Eli asked. North, maybe, Luke said with a faint grin, where the rivers run cold and the hills are still nameless. Might trap a winter or two. Might just keep riding. Eli nodded, understanding etched in the small motion. If trouble finds you, and it will, you know where to send word. The young drifter tipped his hat. And if you ever tire of chasing ghosts, you know where to find me. Somewhere the sky still feels endless. They turned their horses toward the rising sun, the desert wind carrying the quiet rhythm of hooves. Behind them the red canyon glowed like a memory too bright to last, and ahead stretched miles of silver light, where every shadow promised another story. As they rode, the narrator of the West, the wind itself, seemed to speak through the rustle of sage and the cry of hawks. It told of a grizzled Pinkerton who outwitted murderers by wearing the mask of a treasure-seeker, and of a young sharpshooter who chose freedom over fortune. It carried their names across mesas and prairies, through mining camps and lonely saloons, until every campfire storyteller knew the legend of the two riders who left gold untouched and justice served. Some swore the cavern of riches never existed, that it was just another desert fable. Others claimed the gold still sleeps beneath the serpent stone, waiting for fools brave enough to find it. But all agreed on one thing. When the dawn wind rises and the horizon burns with first light, you can almost see them, Two horsemen riding side by side into eternity, bound not by gold, but by the quiet oath of men who lived free and rode true.